G'day, Peter Falson here, MultiValue software support engineer from Zumasys. And today I'm going to present That's Not a Web Server. Now that's a web server. Some of you may have heard of a product called jBASE Agent. It's otherwise known as jRemote or jAgent. And as Aussies like to abbreviate, I'm going to just refer to it as jAgent from here on in. Now, jAgent has a couple of uses, and one of them is maybe not so obvious. Primarily, people are using it for socket connections using .NET or Java, where they'll connect to the jAgent listener and establish a connection, maybe open some files, do some selects, reads and writes and stuff like that. And you can also use it, and it can be the same listener. You can use it for API REST calls for things like third-party apps trying to access your database or maybe your own web page, and you've got some REST calls in there. But you can also quickly spin up a little web server without any Apache or Nginx setup at all. So I'm just going to show you what's involved there. So I'm going to fire up my jAgent config, and I'm not going to go through all this because we have a couple of videos already on our Zumasys YouTube channel that talks about jAgent. So for starters, I'm going to show you, I've got my port set up as 2631, and then there's some environment stuff pointing to my jBASE instance, and notice this is on my Windows jBASE. And then right down the, well, not right down the bottom, near the bottom, we've got this HTTP resource. And out of the box, if you've looked at the jAgent config samples, you've probably just seen this jAgent WDB init comment and setting, which you normally don't want to mess with. But here I've set up a couple of resources, one called jSpooler, which is pointing to /jSpooler index.html, and JSP, which is pointing to jSpooler. I'll explain that second one in a little bit. So if we fire up jBASE agent config equals jAgent config. So we've got our listener running now. And if I flip over to my browser here, it's currently just pointing to localhost. If I point it to localhost 2631, which is the port, and jSpooler, which is the resource that I created, you'll see that it's just fed in a request. And there's my web page. And I can click on view, and you can see it's fired up another request, and it's showing me a print job. This is a GUI spooler utility that's still a work in progress. But as you saw, I'm just firing up a browser, pointing to here, and I haven't had to configure any IIS. It's just purely launched from here. So pretty darn useful. Now, going back into the jAgent config, I just want to explain what this is all about here, this JSP. So in my my code, my web page code, let's have a look at that for a second. You'll see I've got some references here for JSP / various other directories for picking up the JavaScript and other resources, and we can see that here if we cd to jSpooler. See, there's my index.html, and there's my code.js, and there's an NSP directory. Just FYI, that page that you saw was developed in an app called a utility called NSP or App Studio, which is a nice little GUI web. Well, it's not just web. You can do other things with it, but it's a nice little WYSIWYG GUI tool for developing web apps. And all I did was publish it to a folder, FTP the folder down to here, and then I configured my jAgent to point to the jSpooler index.html, and then this JSP is just to redirect any references to JSP / whatever in the web page, tell it to say, okay, well, you need to point to jSpooler, and then everything else is under jSpooler. So that's pretty much it there. But let's say you had your jBASE instance on Linux, and you want to do the same thing. Just make sure that I stop that. Yes, okay. Right. So if I, well, let's briefly look at the jAgent config, and you'll see it's pretty much the same thing, except we've got / now because we're on Linux, not Windows. Otherwise, this config is kind of the same, but just it's pretty much copied from the sample that you would get from jBASE. So this one is a Linux-based one, so I've got my port there again, 2631. And then here's a similar sort of environment setup, but notice these, I've got / and $home instead of %home, things like that. So if I do a, let's see, just show you that this is running on 10.10.17.24. It's a machine running in our private VPN, which I'm connected to, but I can't just point a browser to this IP address 2631 because the only port that's open is port 22. But I can get around that by using a classic old terminal emulator called PuTTY. So let's fire this up first. So now we've got a listener. It's running on 2631. And then I'm going to bring up, actually I closed PuTTY, so let me fire up PuTTY again. So here's my PuTTY. I need to log on. And now if I go into the tunnel, you can see I'm tunneling the local port of 2631 to localhost 2631. Or I could pick any port, but let's just apply that for now. So now that we've applied that, I can re-hit that spooler, and you can see it's now making requests to this server. And then, as you can see, this one only has one print job, as before we had 3 print jobs that I created earlier, just listing MD. And so there. So if you want to test some web services on another machine that you can't access to because of network reasons, you can use PuTTY to redirect the IP port back to your own local host and debug it that way. So that was pretty much it for me, short and sweet. If you have any questions, go to docs.jbase.com, as you can see this address here, and have a look at the introduction to jAgent. And if you go to our Zumasys page on YouTube, you'll see a bunch of other videos as well. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll talk to you later.